My name is Bill Kenny, and I am the founder of Test My Pitch. And our goal today is really to share some of what we've learned as we've traveled around. Our venture is about a year and a half old, and as we've been going out in the marketplace, meeting customers, speaking to folks that are running business plan competitions at universities and communities and all through the world in terms of the greater entrepreneurship ecosystem, we're finding that there are a variety of opportunities in business plan competitions to really drive greater success, both for the ventures and for the ecosystem itself. And really what we want to do today is explore some of those topics, share some of what we're seeing in terms of best practices, and maybe to look a little bit further forward and to see, to really talk about what maybe are some additional opportunities. We really look at workshops like this as really the beginning of the conversation or an entry point into the conversation, and we hope that there is continuing conversation on this topic and not just something where today is an endpoint, but we really continue to work together to work to make these types of programs as valuable as they can be. So without further ado, I'd like to get into the topic, and really first maybe just to introduce myself. We've founded this company called Test My Pitch. This is our sixth startup. We've been here. We have, you'll see, we've been to more than 100 pitch events, or at least I've personally been to more than 100 pitch events in the last year, about 200 in the last 18 to 24 months. And from that, we've really gained a fair amount of insight into what's going on in the marketplace and the ecosystem, and we're a part of many, not just national, but even international conversations about optimizing entrepreneurship ecosystems. And as you can imagine, in going to lots of pitch events, we tend to eat a lot of pizza, and so that's my full disclosure on traveling around to ecosystem events. There's some even have beer, but there's at least pizza. So here's kind of our journey today, and we'd really first like to talk about what three big challenges we see in sort of the typical business plan competition model, and then also to talk about what some potential solutions are, or solutions that we see being enacted now, and then reopen the floor to questions, and for those that didn't get a chance to introduce themselves, to certainly do that. So when we look at the challenges, we really look at kind of three general areas. One is some misalignment in terms of sort of the objectives and the programming. Two is a reduction or a diminishment of engagement. And then challenges around the educational value of the programming. And so we're going to really focus in these three areas, and I think you'll see that there are some really neat opportunities in terms of optimizing these programs. Okay, so in terms of misalignment, we break this down into three general areas. One is unclear objectives, event confusion, and then outdated methodology. When we look at unclear objectives, the real challenge is, and this is probably manifested as we talk to entrepreneurship, business plan competition or business model competition organizers, one of the first questions we ask is, what are you hoping for an outcome? What do you want the ventures or the entrepreneurs to get out of this process? And there's really almost two types of answers we get. One is a very clear, very crystal clear answer to that question in terms of outcomes, and the other is sort of a blank stare. And I'm sort of sad to report that more than half the time we get the blank stare, and that sort of is indicative of ultimately some challenges. And what we talk about from here forward often is the results of not being clear at the outset and aligning the programming to those objectives. So really defining what the endpoints are. And we really, when we see endpoints or goals, we see a variety, I think, that can be very effective. Anything from, sort of teaching entrepreneurship skills. I think with most business plan competitions, the objective isn't necessarily to launch ventures. And it may well be, and it may be that that you're only focused on launching scalable ventures, and that's all fine. But more of the marketplace, I would say, is focused on teaching entrepreneurship. And if that's the case, then the ventures may or may not launch, and if they do, that's wonderful. That's just icing on the cake. But the idea is that these students or entrepreneurs may or may not be successful with this endeavor, but it's really to line them up to be more and more successful in their entrepreneurship journey. And again, we could go a long way into setting objectives, and I think there are a lot of really good ones. But the first step is let's really have an objective. Let's have a goal and align our programming to it. So stating that clear objective is key. And I lived in Texas for a little while, and there was a bumper sticker there that said gun control is hitting what you aim at. And I'm not necessarily advocating guns or gun control, but the point is it's really about having good aim and really striking out to that opportunity. So event confusion, and we see this really quite a bit, and it may come from the idea of lack of clarity in outcomes. But when we see event confusion, what ends up happening is it's really not clear what the goal of each event is or how it fits into the progression of the business plan or business model competition. And ultimately, we look at this process as 3 stages. So when we see a competition, they are anywhere often from a couple of months long, maybe a semester long. They might also be annual in form. But generally, there's a fairly long runway from the beginning to the end of the program, again, be it a couple of months or even a year. And we look at if you look at the sort of y-axis of this diagram, each of these 3 stages is represented, its height is represented or indicative of the length of time within the program that these different stages generally should occupy. So the engage stage, the whole idea of that is that if the events aligned with the engage stage should be getting people in the front door or the back door or a door, but it's really about opening up the community to all comers and to give them the easiest, most encouraging introduction to the process. And then as they move through the process, you begin to go through an education program, and that way you keep and retain as many of the individuals as possible to get through to the end. Most ventures never seek funding, and most ventures never receive funding. In fact, we were just looking at some statistics the other day that tell us that less than 1% of the 6 million startups a year that begin in the U.S., less than 1% will get either venture capital or angel investing. So not to say we shouldn't move on to a funding stage, but the majority of ventures won't be going to that level, and they'll either be bootstrapping or potentially introducing some friends and family money, but more often than not, it's a sort of a bootstrapping model. When we look at engage, if you look at these types of events, and maybe one good way to look at them is how to evaluate the individuals as they go through these events. So just looking at sort of the balance of criteria. So when we look at how do we evaluate the participation in these events is, and maybe what can cause challenges is quite often at the engagement stage, we've seen organizations will use fairly sophisticated review of sort of early stage pitches, and that can create some problems in terms of keeping people interested and engaged. So we would suggest going for a much lighter review early on, much more about the presentation skills and their ability to convey the idea. And then as they move through the various stages, to make the review more and more sophisticated in terms of is it a good idea, is it fundable and scalable, and less about the form or the way they portray the idea, but more the potential of that idea and the potential of the team. And certainly we're more than happy to help more on this. We've actually done some workshops on developing criteria, but again, in the early stages, the real goal is to get people involved, get them excited, and to have a real sort of clear and friendly process for them to go through to sort of stay engaged and get committed. So, in our introductions, some folks talked about sort of the relevance of the business plan, and we do see the beginning of a transition to more either using sort of the business model canvas as a basis for business model competitions instead of business plan competitions. We haven't yet seen, though we suspect there are some that are doing a design thinking based competition, and the business model canvas came out of teachings by Alex Osterwalder and Steve Blank certainly is a heavy advocate of this through the lean startup methodology, and design thinking more comes from Tim Brown and Robert McKim from Stanford. And I think ultimately with any of these, it's really about thinking, again, going back to sort of what's the outcome we want, and to, the idea of a business plan has sort of, it seems, less and less utility in terms of its use both to the venture and to the marketplace relative to either the canvas or the design thinking methodology. And they certainly lend themselves to design thinking and business model canvas methodologies lend themselves a lot more to learning and to faster iteration and to a customer-centered process, which or revenue-centered process, as opposed to sort of a funding-centered process, which we certainly advocate. So the next topic was really about lack of engagement, and we could have the best model and the best sort of design of our program as we want, but if we don't fill the top of the funnel with eager participants, then it does create a bit of a challenge. And so, it's really interesting to see how engagement goes. And our goal in this is really to look at how do we engage students, faculty, administration, alumni, and the greater ecosystem. And all of these stakeholders can have certainly not only gain value, but have a significant influence on our ability to run a great program and also to create more engagement. One of the challenges that we see quite often as organizers are creating their program, their event, is that they'll go through and they'll create a very intimate group that's small and close friends that will help them sort of design the program, and then they'll go out and as they begin the marketing, they'll look to engage all the variety of organizations and individuals they might sort of to propagate information about the event. And more often than not, this seems to be a fairly challenging way to do it, because where people really want to be involved is at the early stage. And so our suggestion would be at the formation stage, before any ink has been put to paper, before there's sort of a first planning meeting, is to pull together all of the constituencies that you would want involved, leaders, informal leaders and formal leaders from those communities, and get their involvement. And this could include faculty from different colleges within whatever system you're in. It could include community leaders. It could include certainly student leaders. there are really no limits, folks, from the ecosystem. It really depends on sort of who you're looking to engage. But if those constituents are involved from the very beginning, then it will whatever program results will be much more aligned with the communities that you're looking to get involved, and those people are going to be much more likely to advocate participation. And we've just seen this model work particularly well to grow all different types of entrepreneurship programming. And ultimately, when you look at this, the challenges of gaining audience, again, you could have the best programming, but if people aren't engaged in it, it can really be troubling. And, this is really, if you think of it, this is really kind of a minimally viable product, or an MVP, is getting your customer in the room and developing the product around them. And, it will certainly create a much higher likelihood of success. So getting people involved at the formation stage, all those key stakeholders, and building the program from there is the suggestion. Next is to set up a leadership infrastructure. So as you've created this formation or formed your event or your program, it's really to develop those formal and informal leaders at all of the institutions and organizations that are going to be participating. So it may be, again, thinking of a university setting, it may be at the various colleges, clubs, organizations within the university and outside. It could be key students, key entrepreneurs, and whatnot, but to have an infrastructure of individuals that enable you to have a two-way dialogue with the various communities that you want involved. So there's certainly going to be information that you're going to want to promote out, and there's going to be feedback that you're going to want to receive from those communities that will allow you to continue to tweak and promote the event, the program in a way that is going to be the most successful. Those informal leaders you'll obviously want to periodically get together with and have ways to download and upload that information. I apologize up front if this slide's a little aggressive, but I didn't want to be shy about this. And one observation that we've had, actually more than maybe I'd like to admit, is that the entrepreneurship community, I say we, including us, we tend to come at maybe others with a bit of arrogance. And what I mean by that is, again, thinking of sort of a university setting, and this probably transcends others as well, but there tends to be a attitude where, as the sort of entrepreneur educators, we sort of say, join, whether it's going to the engineering school or the art school or the law school or whatnot, or the med school, we say, come join our event and we'll help you commercialize your work. We'll help you learn entrepreneurship. And maybe a more enlightened way that we've seen, and we've seen hints of this and some execution of this in really good ways at certain universities, is to, instead of sort of relating what they'll get, is relating what they can contribute. So in other words, it's funny, probably the weakest challenge, or the biggest challenge that entrepreneurs have relative to sort of other disciplines, is the ability to take feedback. And we've probably all seen situations where entrepreneurs defend their ideas passionately, which is a good thing, but it also can create some blind spots. We've seen situations where entrepreneurs stop listening, or they get so attached to their idea that they create large crevices in terms of people's willingness to give them additional feedback. And as we look at other schools, go to the art school or the architecture school or any of the creative disciplines, those students are incredibly good at taking feedback. They learn this. The idea of critiquing is a very natural part of their education. And as opposed to going to the art school or any of the creative schools and saying, come to entrepreneurship, come to our business model or business plan competition and join a team or lead your own team. Imagine coming into the school and saying, hey, you know what? You guys are experts at giving and receiving feedback. We aren't very good at it. Would you mind coming in and doing some content, some workshops that would help us learn from you? And, there are a lot of ways to do this, and obviously it's a very situational example, but the idea is really to find, very light, easy ways for the other parts of your institution to make contributions, to be the teacher as opposed to the student as relates to entrepreneurship. And my guess is, and what we've seen so far, is that you'll find a lot more engagement from them, a lot more interest. The idea of humble outreach, that entrepreneurs don't have all the answers, and that, in fact, we need the contribution of sort of all the other points of view, all the other disciplines, to really create the best venture and the most commercializable or commercially valuable products and services. And so, the idea that we can check our ego at the door is really sort of a key component here. The next thing, and kind of the last thing in this topic area that we see as a challenge in many institutions, is the idea of silos. And it really fits into the other sort of topics within this. And the more there are silos, the more there are clear distinctions and separations between topic areas and different subjects, that the more challenging it is. And certainly the goal is to embed entrepreneurship programming, entrepreneurship curriculum in all parts of the institution, and to make it sort of a key variable that is embedded. Some of the better schools, and I don't mean this, I guess, in a better school way, but some of the better programs that we've seen have been at schools that actually put information about the business model or business plan competitions. It's embedded in freshman orientation. It's embedded in freshman curriculum, and they get the students involved in that language very early on. And some actually even cloak the idea that it's entrepreneurship. University of Massachusetts in Lowell calls their business plan competition the difference maker program. They don't, they sort of, not that they're trying to hide the fact that it's about venture creation, but that they're maybe more customer-centered in thinking about the students' passion for solving a problem and for being leaders in their community. They're really tapping into that energy, and they've in 2 years grown their program to over 5,000 student participants, which from what we see is a pretty remarkable growth trajectory. And and it's certainly creating cross-curricular teams is a big part of it. The key in all of this, and so many of us are involved in ecosystems where there are turfs and fiefdoms, and some of this may be politicized, and we all sort of are in different circumstances. But the more that the focus can be on getting things accomplished, and what we've seen anyway in the more successful programs, there is more than enough credit to go around, and that if we can minimize the focus on ownership and credit and all those types of things, those usually take care of themselves as the program evolves. So the final topic we want to touch on is the idea that or challenge in creating a real strong educational value, and we see this that it's challenged in a few different areas. One, in terms of the market itself, in terms of being market-centered. Two is the ability to give and listen to feedback. Third is about making connections. And then fourth is is the end of all of this, the value of sort of proof of competence in terms of either the venture or the entrepreneur's change since the beginning of the program, being able to validate and measure that. So today, the vast majority of the business plan or business model competitions tend to have an investment centering, and this is evidenced by, one of the criteria in the pitch may be, sort of the investability of the ventures, or that in the scripting, the students are asked to put an ask for money into their scripts or into their pitch, and we see this as challenging from a learning standpoint versus being customer-centered or market-centered. And the more we can get the student entrepreneurs focused on customer creation as opposed to raising money, the more we'll likely find a better learning outcome. It's pretty rare that a customer or that a venture with a lot of customers can't raise money, but it's certainly much more rare that ventures looking for money may not have customers. And so the value of learning how to talk to, how to listen to, how to learn from customers is really the key component that at least we see in what we would suggest maybe are the more mature or successful business model and business plan competitions. So the idea of customer development, of understanding the wants, needs, and actually being able to close on customers, asking for money and receiving sort of financial contribution or pay for services and products really is the validation, the key to validation in learning. So as student entrepreneurs go through various business plan competitions, they get feedback in a couple of ways. The probably most common way is either they're working with mentors or coaches or facilitators, and they'll get feedback at various increments that is generally orally delivered. So it may be that they maybe just pitched or they did an update, and then they'll get feedback, and it may be just from one person or it may be a few people delivering them a variety of points orally. And the challenge in receiving this is that the individual doesn't know the context of the various comments or how to prioritize the various comments versus each other. So even getting feedback from one person and maybe they give us 4 different points of feedback, it's very difficult for the individual to understand which of those is the most important and in what priority they should place those, let alone if they get feedback from a variety of people, and then how to best prioritize those changes. And we've probably all seen where this type of feedback will at times paralyze the individual, and certainly it's sort of an unintended consequence of a mentor program at times. And so the more we can make feedback contextual, the more that entrepreneurs will understand how the different comments relate to each other and can help drive their venture forward. And so the more that the feedback can be systematized and delivered, not necessarily that the mentors or coaches only have sort of a select set of responses, but that it's easy to understand how these responses fit into sort of the overall scheme and priorities of the venture are really key. And there are obviously a lot of ways to do this, and the real key is to make sure that feedback is contextual. So second is this, what we tend to see also is that feedback can be abstract. So how is that challenging? Well, more often than not, there's a situation in sort of entrepreneurial learning where the venture, there's a sort of need of the facilitator, the professor, or whatnot, to, I'm putting air quotes on here, to protect the student entrepreneur. And this can actually be really challenging in terms of the entrepreneur not only knowing how they're actually doing, but really understanding how they can do better and what better looks like. And so if we just give an individual feedback on themselves and they don't see how they're doing versus their cohort, then we're really limiting their view of how they can improve. So while it is nice to know how you're doing sort of in an abstract way, if we go and look at another example of how feedback is given, we might see that there are some opportunities here. So this is something we call referential feedback, and what we're looking at now on the screen are results from a running race. And this is, I don't know if it was a 5K, a 10K, a marathon. By the time, actually it's probably a fairly short race. But the real point is that competitors in races like this not only see how they did, and they can look at how they did to sort of assess how they did versus their own expectations, or how they did versus past performances, but they can also look how they did versus peers. And imagine finishing sort of middle of the pack in any of these age groups or gender groups, the ability to say, wow, here are people that perform better than me, and I can go either observe them or ask them if we can train together and learn from them how they perform better, so that I can begin modeling better performance. And we see modeling work in a lot of different ways. It's certainly pervasive in not only sports, but also in parenting and in a variety of other areas. And the idea that a child can watch mentors, parents, and see what better looks like, and that they don't have to sort of deal in the abstract world. They can deal in a very tangible world to improve their performance, really changes the speed at which people evolve, and that's really the goal. And as we look at the idea that not only can these results be valuable for the individual to look at their cohort and to continue to leapfrog performance, but if you look at your community larger, you're doing, whether it's annual programs or semester programs or whatever the case might be, but they're periodic. Imagine the future participants coming in knowing the results of previous participants, being able to democratize that information so that the next generation is standing on the shoulders of the previous generation. And the speed at which not just the ventures that you're working with now, but your future generations of ventures will learn at will be much faster, and they'll break new ground. They'll be able to go places where the previous ventures haven't been able to go to just because they haven't seen those examples. And so that's, as we look at this, one of the biggest opportunities in entrepreneurial education is the idea of democratizing more of this sort of feedback and results information, so that the ventures, the new ventures, the entering ventures, can start at a whole new place in the process as opposed to starting where their predecessors started. So one of the things that we've seen as we've looked at these programs, business plan competition and model competition programs, is that there often can be pretty good networking inside the institution, but there's a real opportunity to connect to the greater ecosystem. And ultimately, we look at these programs as more of a part of a larger system, and that there is a real opportunity to have a greater outcome by the connections that individuals are able to make through the program. And I guess relating to our own personal experiences, we've been through a couple of accelerators. We've certainly been ourselves through a variety of different programs. And more often than not, when we get to the front door of whatever program it is and we're on our way out, there are no road signs. There's no path to follow or other doors in front of us that are really clear and give sort of a solid pathway. And we, from that, have sort of developed this notion that there's any of these programs, sort of, looking at them from 30,000 feet, could have three stages that possibly look like this. One is that, it's upfront, the idea of engagement. Second is the education. But third is this idea that that part of this is a successful exit. And again, that may be the introductions that can be made. It could be a variety of different programs that an individual could be oriented to, whatever the case might be. Maybe it's, going from a business plan competition to a pre-accelerator to an accelerator. And of course, that's not a path that's right for everybody, but just an example. But the idea being that there are some neat handoffs that can be done and introductions that can be made. And what we've seen in maybe the strongest programs is a real embracement of that idea, and in fact, somewhat of a reverse engineering, so that the upstream organizations are very much a part of the design of the business plan or business model competition and are engaged in that process, so that the program is designed so that it makes the sort of exit, the results at exit, a lot more aligned with what the next program or series of programs need in order to gain entry. And I'll give you an example. We have been doing some work with the Entrepreneurship Center in Nashville, and actually had a real nice tour of their organization this summer. And they actually, before they developed this incredible accelerator, they went and interviewed all of their goal was to accelerate fundable companies. So they went and interviewed all of the funding agencies, the venture capital and the angel groups that they were going to be working with, and basically said, what do you need in order for, if we brought ventures to you, what do you need to put our ventures at the front of the line so that you see them first? And of course, they built a plan from that of what those organizations needed, and all their programming aligned to that. And in fact, they developed sort of a model where they have a portfolio that they end up giving when it's appropriate to the venture capital or angel organizations to establish a proof of competence of their ventures. And what they and others have related to us about how investors make decisions is that the 30 to 70% of the investor decision is based on the team and the entrepreneur's ability to learn. And so the idea that you can look at the evolution of the venture or the entrepreneurs as they go through whatever program it is, and to see them in that trajectory and to see the change has been something that's really helped this Entrepreneur Center create incredible connection to their investment community, and actually not just the idea that their ventures go on and do well in terms of fundraising, but also that that investment community is partially responsible for funding the organization, so that they're really investing in the whole process. So there are a few different ways that you might look at proof of competence. It certainly could be in having everything from a portfolio of accomplishments to looking at quantitative and qualitative scores. But in the end, it's really about looking at the evolution and change that those ventures and entrepreneurs have gained. So that kind of overviews the topic as we see it, and just so those who are on know what we do, we have two tools. One is called Test My Pitch, and it is a platform that helps entrepreneurs, students, professionals develop their communication skills. It's a drafting, posting, and feedback platform. So if you know what Toastmasters is, it's sort of like taking that Toastmasters idea and putting it online. We work with many universities, with various ecosystems, and even have some enterprise-size clients. And then we developed from sort of what we learned as we were going through and building Test My Pitch. We actually learned another tool that is called Score My Pitch, and it's for judging and giving feedback at pitch events. And we have it now used. It's being used on 3 continents and in 3 languages, and essentially a very easy way to capture all the wisdom in the room at a pitch event and aggregate that feedback contextually to the ventures. So that's a little bit about us, but we very much appreciate all of your participation today. We will be sending out a couple of things. We're going to send out, a little later today, we'll just send out a 3-question survey about what you thought of this workshop. Your feedback is really important to us. We really want to deliver as much value as we can in these and see this as a monthly series. We'll be sending out a notice on Monday with an announcement of our next topic, which will actually be feedback and how to develop a system that gives entrepreneurs, students, the best feedback possible. And then certainly if you have any questions about what we do or if you see some ways that we can work together, but we'd be more than glad to do that. If there are connections we can help you make, we'd be glad to do that as well. It's Friday for all of us. We really appreciate your participation and hope you have a great weekend. Thank you so much.